Have you ever wondered if Jesus' most powerful teachings were deliberately removed from the Bible? In 1945, an accidental discovery in Egypt shook the foundations of traditional faith, ancient texts containing words from Jesus that challenge everything you've been taught to believe. The discovery at Nag Hammadi, Egypt, revealed an extraordinary treasure trove of ancient manuscripts. Egyptian farmers found 13 leather-bound papyrus codices inside a sealed clay jar containing 52 treatises, mostly Gnostic. These manuscripts, dated from the 3rd and 4th centuries, are known as the Nag Hammadi Library and include fascinating texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Truth. Why? Because they reveal an explosive truth. The kingdom of God isn't in some distant heaven or apocalyptic end times, but inside you, here and now. Religious elites excluded these texts during the Council of Nicaea because they threatened their power by showing that you have a direct connection to the divine. No intermediaries needed. This 1600-year spiritual conspiracy hid the true awakening of consciousness that Jesus taught. Are you ready to discover what they don't want you to know? Few archaeological discoveries have caused as much spiritual excitement as the Nag Hammadi manuscripts in 1945. Just imagine the scene. Egyptian shepherds, digging in arid soil, accidentally find clay jars containing ancient texts that had been hidden for nearly 2,000 years. It's as if the universe had saved this treasure for a specific moment in human history, right when the world was undergoing profound transformations after a devastating war. No wonder many scholars of consciousness awakening see this discovery as beyond coincidence. After all, in times of apparent collective spiritual blackout, these texts emerge like flashlights in a dark room, illuminating corners of Christian spirituality that remained in the shadows for centuries. And what was in these texts? Nothing less than teachings attributed to Jesus Christ that never made it into the Bible we know today. The Gospel of Thomas, specifically, contains 114 sayings of Jesus, many of which present a radically different vision of spirituality. Man, it's like discovering that a crucial part of the message was deliberately cut from that important letter. You received. And it wasn't just any cut. It happened during the famous Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when Emperor Constantine gathered bishops to establish a unified Christian doctrine. Many researchers in the field of religious conspiracy suggest this process was more political than spiritual, with deliberate choices about which texts would be considered inspired by God and which would be banned. Why were these texts considered so dangerous they had to be excluded? Well, the most likely answer lies in the type of spirituality they promote. While the developing institutional church needed hierarchical structures to consolidate its power, these teachings suggested that each person could access the divine directly, without intermediaries. Wow, that's revolutionary, even by today's standards. Imagine 1600 years ago. It's as if the religious elites of the time realized these texts represented a threat to the power-building project that was underway. After all, how do you control people who believe they can connect directly with the divine without needing an institution to mediate that relationship? What makes the Gospel of Thomas particularly fascinating is how it resonates with contemporary spiritual movements focused on individual consciousness awakening. When Jesus says, "The kingdom is within you and it is outside of you," saying 3, he seems to anticipate many modern approaches to spirituality that emphasize expanded consciousness and direct connection with the divine. It's almost as if we're rediscovering in the 21st century an advanced spiritual technology that was deliberately removed from public knowledge millennia ago. For those on a personal journey of spiritual awakening, these texts offer surprising validation. Perhaps that intuitive feeling that there's more to Jesus' message than what we've been taught in conventional churches isn't just imagination. And what about the moment these texts resurfaced? Right after World War II, when humanity was beginning to deeply question its authority structures and was seeking new forms of spirituality. It doesn't seem coincidental that in the decades following this discovery, there was an explosion of interest in alternative spiritualities, mystical traditions, and personal development concepts. It's as if, at a time when many feared a nuclear apocalypse, The universe provided ancient tools for a new type of collective awakening. And now, in our times of apparent end of traditional values, these texts continue to offer valuable perspectives. The big question that remains is, what else could we learn if we opened ourselves to these messages that were considered too dangerous to be included in the official canon? And how would our spiritual experience be if we recognized the divine kingdom as an immediate presence in our lives? Who hasn't caught themselves imagining what this kingdom of God that religious traditions mention so often would be like? Many visualize it as a distant place, beyond the clouds, accessible only after death or in an apocalyptic future. But what if I told you that according to Jesus' teachings found in the Gospel of Thomas, this kingdom isn't a future destination, but an existing reality here and now? It's jaw-dropping, isn't it? When Jesus states, "The kingdom is within you and it is outside of you," he's practically turning upside down all expectations of a distant paradise. It's as if he was saying, hey, stop looking far away for what's already here. This revolutionary perspective suggests we don't need to wait for the end times to experience spiritual fullness. It's already our fundamental reality. The awakening of consciousness begins precisely when we realize we're not separated from this divine reality. We're immersed in it, like fish in water. Think about it. How many times have you experienced moments of deep connection, clarity, or beauty where time seemed to stop? That feeling when contemplating a magnificent sunset, or the inexplicable peace of holding a newborn baby. These are small glimpses of the kingdom Jesus mentioned, accessible to anyone, regardless of religious affiliation. It's fascinating how religious elites throughout history preferred to keep this knowledge restricted, isn't it? After all, it's much easier to control people who believe they need intermediaries to access the sacred than those who recognize their direct connection to the source. And how do we access this already present kingdom? The banned teachings suggest a path of deep self-knowledge. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you, says Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. Want a practical exercise? Set aside 5 minutes daily to simply observe your thoughts without judgment, like watching clouds passing in the sky. This simple practice, similar to mindfulness meditation, can begin to dissolve the layers of conditioning that prevent us from perceiving the already present kingdom. Many spiritual seekers report that, after consistent presence practices, they begin to experience moments of consciousness expansion where the separation between self and world temporarily dissolves, an experience that would be impossible in a universe fundamentally divided between sacred and profane, as many traditional religions suggest. The concept of a present kingdom of God profoundly challenges our conventional perception of time and reality, and it's no coincidence that this teaching finds interesting parallels in modern quantum physics. When scientists talk about unified fields and the fundamental interconnection of all matter, they're not so far from the spiritual vision expressed in these ancient texts. It's as if we were living in a great cosmic conspiracy in reverse, where the most advanced science and the oldest spirituality converge on the same truth that transcends our artificial divisions. In times of apparent blackout of collective consciousness, where conflicts and divisions seem to dominate the world stage, this perspective offers a radical alternative. What if unity isn't a distant goal, but our natural condition that we've simply forgotten? Curiously, many spiritual traditions around the world also point to this same reality. From the Zen concept of beginner's mind to the Tattvam Asi, thou art that, of Hindu Upanishads, we find echoes of this vision of an immanent divine reality accessible in the present moment. It's almost as if authentic spiritual awakening always transcended cultural and institutional barriers, pointing to a universal truth that resonates in the human heart beyond the limitations of time and geography. And wouldn't that be exactly what would explain why these texts were considered so threatening by those who sought to monopolize access to the divine? When Jesus says, "I am the light that is over all things," he isn't positioning himself as a unique exception, but as a living example of awakened consciousness that recognizes its true nature. And what could be more revolutionary and more dangerous to power structures than the idea that each human being carries this same inner divine light waiting to be recognized. Have you ever thought about how life would be if, instead of seeing ourselves as fallen sinners needing external redemption, we recognized ourselves as fundamentally divine in our essence? That's precisely the spiritual bombshell contained in the apocryphal texts. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus consistently speaks to his listeners not as inherently flawed creatures, but as children of light who have simply forgotten their true nature. Wow, that changes everything, doesn't it? It's like discovering you've spent your whole life thinking you were a beggar, when in fact you've always been the heir to a kingdom. This revolutionary perspective suggests that consciousness awakening doesn't consist of acquiring something new, but in recognizing what we've always been. A truth so powerful that it could cause a complete blackout in religious systems based on dependency and guilt feelings. And when Jesus says, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become as I am," he seems to be offering a direct transmission of consciousness, not a set of rules to be followed or beliefs to be accepted without question. This approach is more similar to the master-disciple model found in practices like Zen, where the master's goal is to lead the student to their own direct realization, not establish permanent authority over them. Can you imagine what Christian spirituality would be like today if this vision had prevailed? Instead of rigid hierarchies and unquestionable dogmas, perhaps we'd have communities of spiritual seekers supporting each other in recognizing their innate divine nature. Nothing the religious elites of the time would want to see proliferate, right? Want to experience what it would be like to live from this understanding, even if just for a few moments. Try this simple exercise. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths and then ask yourself, who am I beyond all my labels, stories, and identifications? Stay with this question, not seeking an intellectual answer, but allowing a deeper sense of identity to emerge naturally. Many spiritual, awakening practitioners report that this simple inquiry can reveal glimpses of a more expansive consciousness that transcends the limits of the separate ego. It's as if, for brief moments, the veil that makes us believe we are limited and isolated beings became temporarily transparent, revealing our true nature as individualized manifestations of universal consciousness. The social impact of this egalitarian vision of human nature would be potentially transformative at all levels. Just think, if we recognize that each person is equally a bearer of divine light with direct access to inner wisdom, how would this transform our educational, political, and economic structures? No wonder this perspective was considered practically an announcement of the end times for those who depended on rigid authority hierarchies. Contemporary communities like the Quakers, who structure their spiritual life around the premise that the inner light is present in each person, offer a glimpse of what religious practices based on these principles might look like. Imagine a world where decisions were made, not based on power and status, but from the collective wisdom emerging when each voice is equally valued. A particularly fascinating aspect of this dimension of Jesus' teachings is how it aligns with contemporary scientific discoveries about our inherent human potential. Studies in neuroplasticity demonstrate how contemplative practices can literally reshape our brain, suggesting that elevated states of consciousness aren't supernatural, but expressions of our natural biological design when properly cultivated. Similarly, research in positive psychology identifies flow states and peak experiences as natural possibilities within the spectrum of human experience, not miracles reserved for saints. This convergence between these ancient spiritual teachings and modern science suggests that perhaps we're finally developing a scientific language to articulate what spiritual masters like Jesus have been pointing to for millennia. That there's a cosmic love conspiracy operating through us, just waiting to be recognized. Have you noticed how we spend most of our mental time wandering between memories of the past and anxieties about the future? It's a kind of blackout of present consciousness. And it's precisely at this point that Jesus' teachings found in the Gospel of Thomas bring a revolutionary perspective. While conventional religious traditions often direct believers' attention to past events, like the crucifixion, or future ones, like the final judgment, these banned texts present a radically different approach. His disciples asked him, "When will the rest for the dead come, and when will the new world come?" He said to them, "What you are looking for has already come, but you do not recognize it." Wow, this is like a spiritual slap in the face. Jesus is practically saying that salvation isn't beyond the horizon, but right here, hidden only by our inability to be fully present in the now. This dimension of Jesus' teachings resonates deeply with contemplative traditions that emphasize awareness of the present moment, like Zen Buddhism and certain streams of Islamic Sufism. It's almost as if there were a spiritual conspiracy among the world's deepest wisdom traditions, all pointing to the same fundamental truth. And in our age of perpetual distraction, where attention is constantly fragmented between notifications, worries, and endless entertainment, this teaching is perhaps even more relevant. Want a practical exercise to experience this? Try dedicating 5 minutes daily to simply observing your breath, noticing when the mind wanders to thoughts about past or future, and gently bringing attention back to the immediate sensation of air entering and leaving your lungs. This practice, taught in evidence-based programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, has shown significant benefits for mental health and well-being. Jesus' perspective on time and eternity in the Gospel of Thomas challenges our dominant cultural understanding of linear temporality. I am the light that is over all things. I am all, from me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. This description of omnipresence suggests a vision of reality, where the divine isn't separated by time or space, but is the very matrix in which everything exists. Modern physics offers an interesting parallel with concepts like quantum non-locality and Einstein's theory of relativity, which challenge our intuitive perception of time as an absolute linear progression. It's as if we were living in the end times of a mechanistic view of the universe, awakening to a more integrated and conscious understanding of reality. The practical effects of this aspect of Jesus' teachings can be profoundly transformative. In everyday life, when we begin to practice presence in the moment, we often discover that many of our afflictions are created not by current circumstances, but by our mental projections about past and future. Consciousness awakening begins precisely with this recognition. For example, have you noticed how anxiety is almost always related to something that hasn't happened yet, or how depression frequently involves rumination about the past? The practice of presence invites us to recognize that most of the time, this exact moment is perfectly bearable. It's our mind that projects a catastrophic future or an irreparable past. The elites of institutionalized spiritual power probably understood how revolutionary this perspective could be. After all, people anchored in the present moment are less susceptible to manipulation by fear. What makes this aspect of Jesus' teachings particularly relevant for our time is how it addresses the contemporary epidemic of disconnection from ourselves, from each other, and from the natural world. In times of apparent ecological and social apocalypse, where structures we considered solid seem to be disintegrating, this ancient wisdom offers a practical path to inner resilience. When Jesus says, "Look to the living one while you live, lest you die and then try to see the living one and be unable to see," he seems to be exhorting us to recognize the sacredness of the present moment before it's too late. The good news is that this practice is available to everyone, regardless of religious affiliation or social status. Perhaps that's why these teachings were considered so threatening by the guardians of institutional power. They democratize access to the divine, making it a matter of awakened consciousness, not correct affiliation or proper ritual. One of the deepest and most transformative teachings found in the Gospel of Thomas is Jesus' instruction to bring forth what is within you, suggesting that each person carries inside them a unique divine essence that needs to be expressed in the world. In one of the most impactful sayings, he warns, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Wow, that's practically a spiritual ultimatum. Jesus is suggesting there's something deeply dangerous about suppressing our true nature and unique gifts. It's as if each of us were a seed containing a specific pattern. A rose can't bloom as an oak tree, nor should it try. In times of apparent end of traditional life patterns, this teaching offers an internal compass, to navigate individual and collective consciousness awakening. Curiously, this aspect of the banned teachings seems to anticipate modern psychology's discoveries about authenticity and well-being. Researchers like Martin Seligman, pioneer of positive psychology, have identified that a meaningful life emerges when we use our unique talents and strengths in service of something bigger than ourselves. It's as if there were a benevolent conspiracy between our deepest nature and the world's well-being. Want a practical tool to start exploring this? The VIA survey of character strengths allows anyone to identify their natural talents as a first step toward a more fulfilling life. Similarly, the concept of life purpose, or ikigai in Japanese tradition, the intersection between what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at, remarkably resonates with Jesus' teaching about bringing forth what is within us. The warning dimension of this teaching, that what we don't bring forth will destroy us, deeply echoes psychologist Carl Jung's work on the shadow and the danger of repressing aspects of our psyche. In the context of these ancient texts, Jesus seems to be warning that denying our true nature and purpose isn't just a missed opportunity, but actively harmful to our well-being. Think about the consequences of following a life path that fundamentally contradicts who you are, the internal tension, the gradual draining of vitality, the feeling of living a life that isn't truly yours. It's like a gradual blackout of the soul. In an age of apparent apocalypse of meaningful values, where many feel pressured to conform to empty external expectations, this teaching offers a powerful antidote: the courage to be authentically who we are even when this challenges established norms. A fascinating aspect of this dimension of Jesus' teachings is how it proposes a balance between the spiritual and material aspects of existence. Unlike ascetic traditions that reject the material world as illusory or corrupt, or purely materialistic approaches that ignore the spiritual dimension, Jesus seems to be advocating for a harmonious integration. In one of the sayings, he talks about making the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, suggesting that our inner and outer lives should reflect each other rather than being in conflict. This integrated vision resonates with contemporary approaches like embodied spirituality proposed by theologian Matthew Fox, which seek to unite spiritual awareness with active engagement in the world. It's not about escaping material reality, nor ignoring the spiritual. It's about awakening to the divine presence manifesting through our full humanity. What makes this aspect of Jesus' teachings particularly relevant for our time is how it addresses the contemporary epidemic of disconnection from ourselves, from each other, and from the natural world. By inviting us to bring forth what is within us, Jesus seems to be offering an antidote to the alienation that characterizes so many modern lives. Gabor Mate's pioneering work on trauma and addiction demonstrates how many self-destructive behaviors are rooted in disconnection from our true self. Practices like focusing, developed by Eugene Gendlin, offer concrete methods to re-establish contact with our inner wisdom, that something within us that Jesus exhorts us to bring forth. In times when many fear a civilizational or spiritual collapse, a true end of times as we know it, perhaps the way forward isn't a new external system, but a collective awakening to the wisdom that already resides within each of us, waiting to be recognized and manifested in the world. We've reached the end of this journey through Jesus' hidden teachings, but really we're just getting started with an understanding that could completely transform your life. The spiritual secrets we've explored today are powerful tools now, in your hands. So here's the real question. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you continue blindly following what others say is truth, or will you have the courage to investigate for yourself what Jesus really taught? Imagine what your life would be like if you actually practice these truths, recognizing that God's kingdom is right here inside and around you in this moment, understanding that you're not a sinner waiting for external salvation, but a divine being who has temporarily forgotten who you are. What if this spiritual blackout we're experiencing is just a temporary veil about to be lifted by a collective awakening of consciousness? The elites who control dominant religious narratives fear exactly this, that you'll discover your own inner power, Your job now is to experience these banned teachings firsthand. Start by dedicating 10 minutes daily to practicing presence. Reflect on Jesus' words as you observe the world around you. How would your life be different if you actually lived according to this ancient wisdom? In times of apparent conspiracy against genuine spiritual development, this might be the key to navigating the apocalypse of old structures we're witnessing. If you want to go deeper into these revolutionary insights and discover more spiritual secrets, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Share this video with someone who could benefit from this ancient wisdom. Until next time, stay awake to the kingdom that's already here, inside you and all around you.